The first time I noticed Tristan staring at me, I assumed he was just waiting for me to finish talking. Our biology lab was loud enough to make conversation annoying. Centrifuges hummed in the background, glass beakers clinked together, and Professor Ellis kept reminding everyone that contamination would ruin the entire experiment. Half the class looked exhausted after midterms, while the other half was pretending to understand the instructions without actually reading them. I was somewhere in the middle. I had transferred into the program only a month earlier, which meant I was still the new guy everyone recognized, but nobody really knew. I wasn't shy exactly. I just hated forcing conversations that clearly weren't going anywhere. Roman. I looked up. Professor Ellis was holding a clipboard. You'll be working with Tristan starting today. A tall blonde guy looked up from the opposite workstation. Guess that's me. His voice was calm. Low. Almost bored. I walked over and offered my hand. I'm Roman. He glanced at my hand for a second before shaking it. Tristan. That was it. No smile. No small talk. Nothing. I figured he was one of those students who only cared about grades. Fine by me. We spent the next hour preparing bacterial cultures, labeling tubes, checking measurements, and trying not to get in each other's way. He barely spoke. Whenever I asked something work-related, he answered with exactly enough words to be helpful. No. Yes. Third shelf. Use the blue marker. Efficient. Cold. At least that's what I thought. Until I caught him looking at me. Not once. 3 times. The first time happened while I was writing observations into our notebook. I glanced up. His eyes were already on me. He immediately looked back down at the microscope. Weird. Maybe he wasn't paying attention. A few minutes later, I reached for a pipette. Again. He was watching me. Not my hands. Me. The moment our eyes met, he turned away. By the third time, I started wondering if I had something on my face. You okay? I asked. He blinked. What? You keep looking at me. For the first time all afternoon, he actually seemed caught off guard. I do. Unless someone behind me has suddenly become fascinating. He looked past my shoulder for half a second before giving the smallest shrug. I was thinking about our experiment while staring at me. Maybe. I laughed. That's a terrible excuse. He didn't laugh back. Instead, he quietly returned to measuring samples. The conversation ended there. Still, something about his reaction felt genuine, like he honestly hadn't realized he'd been doing it. When class ended, everyone rushed toward the exit. I packed my backpack and headed outside. The October air felt colder than it had that morning. Leaves covered almost every sidewalk on campus, and students were scattered across the lawn pretending to study while mostly talking. I had just reached the coffee stand near the science building when someone stopped beside me. Tristan, you forgot this. He held out my notebook. I looked down. He was right. I didn't even notice. You would have tomorrow. Probably. I took it from him. Thanks. He nodded, then stayed standing there. Neither of us spoke. It wasn't awkward exactly. Just unexpected. You heading home? I asked. Dorm. You live on campus? Yeah. Lucky. You don't. I rent an apartment about 20 minutes away. He nodded again. Another silence. I was about to say goodbye when he suddenly asked, why did you transfer? Finally, an actual question. My old university cut the research program. So you moved? Pretty much. You don't miss it. I thought about that. Not really. He looked at me for another second. I would. Then he walked away. I watched him disappear between 2 buildings. Strange guy? The next lab wasn't until Thursday. I honestly didn't think about Tristan much until then. Mostly because chemistry was destroying my week. By Thursday morning, I was running on 4 hours of sleep and entirely too much coffee. When I entered the lab, Tristan was already there. Same station. Same expression. Without looking up, he slid a pair of safety goggles toward my side of the table. I took extras. Oh, last week yours kept fogging. I blinked. You remembered that? He looked confused. Yeah. Why? Another pause. I remember things. That was somehow the most Tristan answer imaginable. During class, he spoke a little more than before. Not a lot. Just enough. He explained a faster way to organize samples. Corrected one calculation before I made a mistake. Quietly pushed a calculator toward me when mine died. Small things. Thoughtful things. Things that didn't match the distant image I'd built in my head. Near the end of class, Professor Ellis announced a semester project. Pairs. 10 weeks. One final presentation. Groans echoed across the room. I wasn't thrilled either. Professor Ellis smiled anyway. You already have your partners. Great. 10 weeks. With the guy who stared at me like I was part of the experiment. As everyone packed up, Tristan asked, "You busy Saturday?" The question came so suddenly, I almost answered without thinking. "I work until 3. Oh. He looked disappointed for only a fraction of a second. I was going to suggest starting the project. "We still can." He looked back up. "After work?" "Sure." He nodded once. "I'll meet you at the library." "No complaints about spending your Saturday studying?" "I like studying." I laughed. "I believe you." This time, very briefly, the corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. Almost. As I left campus, I caught myself smiling too, which made absolutely no sense. I'd known Tristan for less than a week. He barely talked. He looked at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. And somehow, I was already curious about him. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. Work dragged. Every customer seemed determined to ask complicated questions 5 minutes before my shift ended, and I checked the clock more often than I wanted to admit. Not because I was excited about spending the afternoon studying. At least that's what I kept telling myself. When I finally left, my phone buzzed. "Tristan, already here." No greeting. No emoji. Just 3 words. I smiled anyway. The university library was quieter than usual. Midterms were over, so most students had disappeared outside to enjoy one of the last warm weekends before winter. Tristan sat exactly where he'd said he would, surrounded by open textbooks, color-coded notes, and enough highlighters to stock a small office. "You've been here a while." He looked up. 43 minutes. "You counted." "I got here at 3. I laughed as I dropped my backpack beside the chair. "Of course you did." He slid a printed outline across the table. "I made a schedule." "You already made a schedule?" "We have 10 weeks. It's been 2 days." "I know." I stared at the pages. Everything was organized. Research topics, deadlines, reading assignments, even estimated hours for each section. "You planned our entire project." "I only planned the first 4 weeks." "Only." He finally noticed my expression. "Is that too much?" The question sounded almost uncertain. For the first time since we'd met, Tristan didn't seem confident. He looked worried. "No." I smiled. "It's impressive." His shoulders relaxed. "Okay." We spent the next 2 hours working through research articles. Eventually I noticed something. Whenever I concentrated on reading, Tristan concentrated on me. Every few minutes I'd look up. Every few minutes he'd already be looking. Again and again. Finally I closed my laptop. "Seriously." He blinked. "What?" "You keep doing it." "Doing what?" "Looking at me." "I don't." "You literally are right now." He looked away so quickly that I almost laughed. "I wasn't." "You were." Silence. "I wasn't trying to." That answer caught me off guard. "So you know you're doing it?" "Sometimes." "Why?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't know." "You don't know?" "No." I leaned back. "That's somehow even stranger." He nodded slightly. "I know." Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Does it bother you?" The question was quiet. Honest. I considered it. "Not really." "It doesn't. It's just confusing." He looked relieved. "I wasn't trying to make you uncomfortable." I figured. Another silence settled between us. Unlike before, it wasn't awkward. Just thoughtful. Around 6 o'clock, my stomach growled loudly enough for both of us to hear. Tristan looked up. "You haven't eaten." "I had breakfast." "It's 6. I've been busy." He closed his notebook. "We're taking a break." "That's not how breaks work." "It is today." 5 minutes later, we were walking toward a small cafe just outside campus. "You come here often?" I asked. 3 times a week." "You have a schedule for coffee too?" "Yes." I laughed. I was joking. I wasn't. Of course he wasn't. The cafe was nearly empty. We ordered sandwiches and found a table near the window. For the first few minutes we talked about classes. Then professors. Then music. That surprised me. "You listen to old rock?" Tristan nodded. "My dad did." "So that's where it came from." "You?" "My older brother." "You have siblings?" "One." "You talk to him often?" "Every week." He nodded thoughtfully. "I don't have any." I figured. "Why?" "You never mention anyone." "I don't mention much." That was true. He didn't. "So," I said, "what do you do besides studying?" He looked genuinely puzzled. "I study. I mean hobbies." "I read." "Anything else?" "Sleep." I laughed so hard the woman at the next table looked over. "You cannot be serious." "I am." "That's your entire life?" "I go running." "There we go." Twice a week. Progress. For the first time since we'd met. Tristan laughed. Not loudly. Just a short, genuine laugh. It completely changed his face. He looked younger. Warmer. More approachable. You should do that more often. What? Smile. His expression immediately became neutral again. I do. No, you don't. I smiled yesterday. I must have missed it. You did. I'm starting to think your smiles are endangered. They're selective. I feel honored. He looked down at his coffee. You should. The words were so quiet, I almost missed them. What? Nothing. He simply took another sip. When we left the cafe, the sun was already setting. The campus looked completely different under the orange evening light. Students crossed the paths in small groups, laughing about parties and weekend plans. A group walked past us. One girl waved enthusiastically at Tristan. Hey. He lifted his hand politely. Hi. She kept walking. I looked at him. You know a lot of people? Not really. She seemed friendly. We had statistics together. And she remembered you. So people notice you. He shrugged. I don't think about it. You don't think about a lot of things. I think constantly. You know what I mean. I know. We reached the parking lot where our paths split. My apartment's that way. My dorm's there. Neither of us moved. Same time Tuesday. I asked. For the project? Unless you've already finished it without me. I've only outlined the introduction. I laughed. Of course you have. He adjusted the strap of his backpack, then looked directly at me again. Longer than usual. What? I asked. He hesitated. Nothing. Tristan, you look different outside the lab. I do. He nodded. How? I don't know. There it was again. That strange honesty. He never seemed embarrassed to admit he didn't have an answer. I'll take that as a compliment. It was. He turned toward the dorms, then stopped after only a few steps. Roman. Yeah. I'm glad Professor Ellis paired us. I smiled. Me too. He held my gaze for another moment, then quietly walked away. I watched him disappear between the buildings. There it was again. That strange feeling. Like there was something Tristan wanted to say every time he looked at me. Something he couldn't quite put into words. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I was starting to want to know what it was. Tuesday afternoon started with rain. Not the dramatic kind that flooded sidewalks in minutes. Just a steady drizzle that made everyone rush between buildings with their heads down. By the time I reached the biology lab, my jacket was damp, and my hair probably looked worse than I wanted to admit. Tristan looked up the moment I walked in. You're wet. Thank you for the observation. It wasn't meant as one. I know. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded towel. I stared at it. You carry a towel? Usually. Why? In case it rains. It wasn't supposed to. It did. I accepted it, shaking my head. You're impossible. So I've been told. Professor Ellis arrived a minute later and immediately assigned everyone new samples to analyze. The work required concentration, careful measurements, accurate notes, no distractions. Unfortunately, distractions kept finding me, mostly in the form of Tristan quietly looking in my direction every few minutes. At one point, I intentionally looked up without warning. Caught. Again. He immediately pretended to study a rack of test tubes. There are only 12 tubes, I whispered. What? You've counted them 3 times. I wasn't counting. You were avoiding eye contact. I was. I smiled. You're getting predictable. His ears turned slightly pink. It was the first visible sign I'd ever seen that he could actually feel embarrassed. Somehow that made him seem far less intimidating. After class, Professor Ellis stopped us before we could leave. I've booked the genetics lab for your semester projects beginning next week. Several students groaned. The room is available every Wednesday evening. Wednesday, the one evening I usually kept free. Tristan wrote the schedule down immediately. I just sighed. Outside the building, the rain had finally stopped. Students filled the walkways again, talking over one another as if the weather had never interrupted the day. You hungry? The question came from Tristan. You asked me that last weekend. You forgot lunch again. I didn't forget. You skipped it. Maybe. He looked almost satisfied. I know a place. You always know a place. I do. Instead of the cafe from Saturday, he led me toward a small diner tucked behind the engineering building. It wasn't fancy, just warm, comfortable. The kind of place students discovered during freshman year and never stopped visiting. I've never been here. I know. How? You would have mentioned it. You really do remember everything. I remember things about people. The sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. After we ordered, I leaned back in the booth. So, so, I know almost nothing about you. He looked confused. You know my major. I also know your favorite color-coded highlighters. They're useful. I don't know where you're from. The next town over. Your family. My parents. No brothers or sisters. No. You've never left the state? No. You've seriously lived here your entire life? Yes. I laughed. You really don't like change. I don't. What if someone offered you a dream job across the country? I'd think about it. For how long? A few years. I laughed again. You can't be serious. I am. What about you? I've moved 3 times. I know. You do? You transferred. Right. You mentioned your brother. Also true. You worked in a bookstore before your current job. I blinked. I told you that. During our first lab. I barely remember saying it. I remember. It suddenly occurred to me that Tristan probably knew more about me than most people I'd known for years. Not because I'd told him more. Because he'd listened more carefully. Can I ask you something? He nodded. Why do you remember everything I say? He looked down at his cup. I don't remember everything. Feels like you do. It's easier with. He stopped. With. He hesitated for several seconds. People I like. The answer came so quietly that I almost wasn't sure I'd heard it correctly. You like me? He looked up. Yes. The simplicity of it caught me completely off guard. No hesitation. No attempt to make the sentence sound less direct. Just honesty. I thought that was obvious. It really wasn't. Oh. He looked genuinely surprised. I don't always understand what's obvious. I'm starting to notice. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable. Just thoughtful. So that's why you keep staring? The moment the words left my mouth, Tristan froze. He stared at the table, then sighed. Probably. I knew it. I wasn't trying to. I believe you. I just. He searched for the right words. When someone interests me. He stopped again. I notice things. What kind of things? The way you smile before you laugh. I blinked. The way you tap your fingers when you're thinking. I hadn't even realized I did that. You always read the last page of an article first. How do you know that? I've seen you do it. He looked almost embarrassed now. You push your glasses higher when you're tired. I don't wear. I stopped. I did. Usually during long study sessions. I hadn't worn them today. You've really been paying attention. Yes. There wasn't anything uncomfortable about the way he said it. If anything, he sounded worried that I'd think it was strange. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. I wasn't sure anymore. What I was sure of was this. Nobody had ever noticed that much about me before. And somehow, instead of making me uncomfortable, it made me wonder what else Tristan had quietly seen while I wasn't looking. The rest of the week felt different. Not because anything dramatic happened. Because nothing did. Tristan still met me outside the lab every Tuesday and Thursday. We still worked through our project. We still spent hours in the library every Saturday. The only real difference was that I had stopped wondering whether he liked me. He'd already answered that. Honestly, without hesitation. It should have made things less confusing. Instead, it made me notice him even more. On Wednesday evening, we finally started working in the genetics lab for our semester project. Unlike the regular teaching labs, this room was almost empty. Only 4 project groups had shown up. The lights were dimmer. The conversations quieter. Everyone seemed focused. Tristan was already wearing gloves when I arrived. You're early. I always am. I know. He looked at me for a second. You were smiling before you came in. I laughed. See? That's exactly what I mean. What? You notice everything. I notice you. He said it so naturally that it took me a moment to respond. You really don't filter your thoughts, do you? I try. Not very successfully. Probably not. For the next hour, we prepared DNA samples, compared sequencing results, and argued about one unexpected data set. I think it's contamination. It isn't. It has to be. It doesn't. You sound very confident. I checked twice. I checked 3 times. I checked 4. I stared at him. You actually did, didn't you? Yes. I sighed dramatically. I hate arguing with people who enjoy being thorough. I enjoy being correct. I laughed. I noticed. Professor Ellis walked past our station and glanced at our notes. You two work well together. Neither of us answered. The professor smiled knowingly. I wish every pair argued this politely. Once he walked away, I looked at Tristan. We argue politely? We do. I've called you impossible 3 times this week. You smiled every time. Fair point. Around 8 o'clock, we finally finished for the evening. Most of the other students had already left. Outside, the campus was almost empty. Streetlights reflected off the wet sidewalks from yesterday's rain. You parked? I shook my head. I walked. So did I. For some reason, neither of us headed in opposite directions. Instead, we walked slowly through campus together. So, I looked over at him. So, you never answered my question. What question? You said I notice everything. Right. What do you notice about me? I smiled. You really want to know? Yes. I thought about it. Okay. He looked almost nervous. You always know where everything is. He nodded. You never interrupt people. Another nod. You think before every sentence. Usually. You pretend you don't have a sense of humor. I don't pretend. You absolutely do. I disagree. You make jokes with a completely serious face. I do. There. I pointed at him. That. What? You're doing it again. For the first time all evening, he laughed. A real laugh. Longer this time. You've been smiling more lately. The words slipped out before I could stop them. He became quiet. Have I? Definitely. I didn't notice. I did. He looked away toward the trees lining the path. I think. He hesitated. I've just been happier. The sentence settled between us. Simple. Honest. I like spending time with you. Again. No hesitation. No attempt to hide behind different words. Just the truth. I wasn't used to people being like that. Most people wrapped simple feelings in jokes or sarcasm. Tristan simply said them. I'm glad. It was all I could think of. He smiled again. This one lasted a little longer. As we reached the intersection where our paths separated, he stopped walking. Roman. Yeah. Can I ask you something? Sure. When you said I was staring, you mean constantly? Yes. Were you uncomfortable? The question sounded almost cautious, like he'd been thinking about it for days. I answered honestly. No, you weren't. I was curious. About what? About why. And now, I looked at him for a moment. I think I'm starting to understand. His expression softened. I wasn't trying to study you. I know. He searched for the words again. When I enjoy being around someone. Another pause. I like looking at them. I couldn't help smiling. That's probably the most Tristan sentence you've ever said. It is. Completely. He looked relieved that I wasn't laughing at him. I've never been very good at explaining myself. I don't think that's true. No. I think you're good at explaining. I paused. You just don't realize how honest you are. He looked genuinely puzzled. I am. You tell people exactly what you're thinking. Isn't that normal? I laughed softly. No, it isn't. Most people hide half of what they're thinking. Why? Because they're afraid. He considered that answer for several seconds. I don't think I like that. I didn't think you would. We stood there longer than either of us needed to. Neither of us seemed in a hurry to leave. Finally, Tristan spoke again. Would you want to do something this weekend? We already have the project. I know. I meant. He looked unusually uncertain. Not the project. I raised an eyebrow. You mean, just spend time together? He nodded once. If you'd like to. For a second, I simply looked at him. Somewhere over the past 2 weeks, we'd stopped feeling like two classmates assigned to the same project. Without either of us noticing, we'd started looking for reasons to see each other outside the lab. And I had a feeling Tristan had realized it before I had. I answered before I had time to overthink it. Yeah. The word came out naturally. No hesitation. Tristan's shoulders relaxed almost immediately. What did you have in mind? I don't know. I laughed. You invited me. I know. And you don't have a plan? I wanted to know if you'd say yes first. That somehow made perfect sense. So now what? He thought for a moment. There's a botanical garden about 15 minutes from campus. I've never been. I know. You've really started saying that a lot. You mentioned places you've visited. And I never mentioned that one. No. So you noticed? Yes. I shook my head, smiling. I don't think I'll ever get used to that. You don't have to. Saturday morning was colder than usual. The trees around campus had turned shades of orange and red, and the sidewalks were almost completely covered with leaves. Tristan was already waiting near the entrance when I arrived. Exactly on time. Of course. You've been here long? 6 minutes. Only 6. I didn't want to be too early. I'm impressed. I practiced. That actually made me laugh. The botanical garden was quieter than I expected. Only a few families wandered along the paths, and several photographers were taking pictures of the autumn colors. For a while we simply walked. No project. No notebooks. No deadlines. Just conversation. I used to come here when I was a kid, Tristan said. With your parents? My mom. She likes plants. She likes quiet places. You sound like her. He looked at me. I do. You both apparently enjoy peaceful afternoons surrounded by trees. I suppose. We wandered into one of the greenhouses, where the air immediately became warmer. Humidity fogged my glasses. I can't see anything. Tristan smiled. You push them up when that happens. I know. You did it. I always do. I know. I looked at him over the top of my glasses. Was there ever a chance you weren't going to memorize every little habit I have? I don't think so. The answer came without even a second of thought. We stopped beside a pond filled with bright orange koi. Neither of us spoke for a while. It felt comfortable. The kind of silence that doesn't ask to be filled. Eventually I broke it. So, when was the first time you started noticing all those things? He looked at the water instead of at me. The first lap. The first day? Yes. Why? I don't know. You really don't. He was quiet for several seconds. Not at first. And later. I just kept looking. I smiled. I noticed. I know. He glanced at me. I thought you might think I was strange. I did. His expression fell slightly. But I continued before he could misunderstand. Not in a bad way. He looked relieved. I searched for the right words. I'd never met anyone who paid that much attention. I don't usually. You don't. He shook his head. Only sometimes. What's different this time? His answer came almost immediately. You. I looked away for a second. Not because I was uncomfortable. Because I wasn't sure what to do with a sentence like that. There wasn't any flirting in his voice. No attempt to impress me. Just quiet honesty. So, I said after a moment. I've been wondering something. What? Do you have many friends? He thought for a moment. A few. You don't spend much time with them. No. Why? I get tired. Of people. He nodded. They're loud. And I'm not. You can be. I laughed. I'll take that. But you're easy. What does that mean? He looked directly at me. I don't feel tired after talking to you. Something about the way he said it made my chest feel unexpectedly warm. Nobody had ever described me like that before. Easy. It sounded important. As we continued walking, a little girl ran past us chasing fallen leaves. Her father apologized with an embarrassed smile. Sorry. No problem, I replied. Once they disappeared down the path, Tristan quietly said, You'd be a good dad. I looked at him in surprise. That came out of nowhere. I know. Why would you say that? You were smiling at her. So, you always smile at children. I do. Yes. I've never noticed. I have. I laughed softly. I really wish I could spend one day seeing the world the way you do. He looked genuinely confused. Why? Because you notice things nobody else does. He thought about that. I don't think I notice more. No. I think. He hesitated. I just don't stop looking. We reached a wooden bridge overlooking the center of the garden. The water reflected the autumn trees like a painting. Neither of us said anything for almost a minute. Then Tristan quietly spoke. Roman. Yeah. I'm glad you aren't uncomfortable around me anymore. I turned toward him. You've been thinking about that? Yes. For how long? Since you asked why I kept looking at you. I smiled. You know what's funny? What? I don't think I'd even notice if you stopped. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? I've gotten used to it. You have? Yeah. It feels. I searched for the right word. Normal now. For the first time since we'd met, Tristan looked completely speechless. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Finally, a small smile appeared. One that stayed a little longer than usual. I like that. So do I. Neither of us realized it then. But somewhere between bacteria cultures, library sessions, and quiet walks through autumn gardens, we had stopped acting like classmates. We had started becoming something much closer. Neither of us was ready to put a name to it yet. But for the first time, it felt like we were both walking in the same direction. The following week settled into a rhythm neither of us had planned. Monday usually meant exchanging a few messages about classes. Tuesday was the lab. Wednesday evening belonged to our genetics project. Thursday somehow turned into dinner after class. By Friday, I found myself wondering what Tristan was doing whenever we weren't together. That realization caught me off guard. It wasn't dramatic, just unfamiliar. On Thursday afternoon, we finished our lab almost 30 minutes early. Professor Ellis looked pleasantly surprised. I think that's the fastest anyone has completed this assignment. Tristan looked at our notes. We prepared. The professor smiled. I've noticed. As everyone packed up, Professor Ellis added one more announcement. The science department is hosting an open research exhibition next month. Student project groups can volunteer to present. Groans filled the room. Extra work. Extra hours. Extra responsibility. I'll post the sign-up sheet tomorrow. The moment the professor walked away, I looked at Tristan. Please tell me you're thinking what I'm thinking. We should volunteer. I sighed dramatically. I knew it. It would look good on graduate school applications. I hate how reasonable you sound. He tilted his head. So that's a yes. I didn't say that. You will. I probably will. You usually do. I pointed at him. That confidence is becoming a problem. It has been statistically reliable. I laughed. You've started making jokes. I have. Don't pretend. I'm not pretending. He paused. Was that a joke? It absolutely was. He looked genuinely thoughtful. I didn't mean it to be. I know. Somehow that made it even funnier. That evening we stopped by the diner again. The waitress recognized us immediately. The usual? I looked at Tristan. We have a usual? We've ordered the same thing 3 times. I didn't even notice. I did. Of course you did. She smiled while writing down the order. You two must spend a lot of time studying together. Before I could answer, Tristan simply said, yes. The waitress nodded. That's nice. Nothing more. No teasing. No assumptions. Just a simple observation. Once she walked away, I looked across the table. You answer everything so directly. I answered her question. I know. You would have answered differently? I probably would have said something longer. Why? I don't know. He smiled slightly. I noticed. I rolled my eyes. I walked into that one. You did. Dinner passed more slowly than usual. We talked about professors, movies, books neither of us had read, but both kept meaning to. At one point my phone buzzed. A message from my older brother. How's the mysterious lab partner? I frowned. Tristan looked up. Everything okay? My brother. The one you call every Sunday? Yes. He remembers details too. I blinked. You're right. I know. I laughed. He keeps asking about you. Why? I might mention you more than I realize. Tristan became unusually quiet. You talk about me? I guess. Often. I thought about it. More than once. His expression softened in a way I hadn't seen before. Nobody usually talks about me. I looked at him carefully. What do you mean? I mean, he shrugged. I'm not very interesting. I stared at him. Who told you that? No one. You just decided it yourself? I suppose. I leaned forward. Tristan. He looked up. You're one of the most interesting people I've met. He looked genuinely surprised. I am. You're thoughtful. Silence. You remember everything. Another silence. You're honest. He looked down at his coffee. And I smiled. You're a lot funnier than you think. A quiet laugh escaped him. I don't think that's true. It is. You laugh because I'm serious. I laugh because you're accidentally funny. I don't know how to do that on purpose. Please don't learn. Why? It wouldn't be the same. He smiled again. Longer this time. After dinner, we walked toward campus. The evening air had turned noticeably colder, and students hurried past wearing heavier jackets than they had just a week earlier. About halfway across the quad, Tristan suddenly stopped. What? He looked toward the library entrance. There. I followed his gaze. A girl from one of our chemistry lectures was waving at us. More specifically, she was waving at me. Roman. I waved back. Hey. She walked over with an easy smile. I was hoping I'd run into you. What's up? I missed Monday's lecture. Could you send me your notes? Sure. You're seriously the only person whose notes are actually readable. I laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. It is. She smiled again before heading toward the library. See you Tuesday. See you. As soon as she disappeared inside, we started walking again. Neither of us spoke. It wasn't uncomfortable, just unusually quiet. Finally, I glanced sideways. You okay? Yes. You got really quiet. I know. Something on your mind? He kept looking straight ahead. Does she like you? The question was so unexpected that I almost stopped walking. I have no idea. You've never wondered? Not really. He nodded once. Silence returned. A minute later, I smiled to myself. What? Tristan asked. Were you? I hesitated. Jealous. He stopped walking. Actually stopped. He looked at me with complete sincerity. I think I was. There wasn't a trace of embarrassment in his voice. Just another honest answer. I stared at him for a moment. You really don't know how to hide what you're feeling. No, I don't think I want you to learn. He looked at me for a long second. Then, very quietly, he said, I'm glad. For reasons I couldn't fully explain. So was I? After that conversation, something subtle shifted between us. Not overnight. Not dramatically. Just enough that I started catching Tristan smiling before he realized he was doing it. It happened during lab the following Tuesday. Professor Ellis was explaining a complicated procedure involving gene sequencing, and everyone was focused on copying the instructions before they disappeared from the projector. I reached for my notebook. It wasn't there. I checked my backpack. Nothing. I left it at home. Without saying a word, Tristan quietly slid his notebook toward me. You'll need this. What about you? I already memorized the instructions. I looked at him. You memorized all of that? Mostly. Professor Ellis erased the slide. Tristan immediately began writing from memory. Every step, every measurement, every note. I watched for almost a minute. You're ridiculous. I've heard that. No, seriously. You missed step 7. I looked back at what I'd copied. I did. You skipped one temperature. He pointed to the correct number without even looking at his own notes. How? I remember. You remember everything. Not everything. Name one thing you've forgotten. He thought for a moment. I forgot my umbrella once. I laughed quietly. That almost sounds impossible. It only happened once. During the experiment, we had to share one microscope. Normally, we took turns. This sample required both of us to compare observations at the same time. Come here, Tristan said. I leaned closer. Our shoulders almost touched as we looked through different lenses. What do you see? There's a mutation on the left. He nodded. I thought so. You already saw it. I wanted to know if you would. You were testing me? I trust your observations. That answer made me smile. You know, I adjusted the focus. You give surprisingly nice compliments. I wasn't complimenting you. You literally said you trust me. I did. So that's a compliment. Oh, he seemed to think about that. I suppose it is. Professor Ellis wandered over again. Everything going well? Yes, Tristan answered. We're done. The professor looked at the microscope. You finished already? We agreed on the results. Professor Ellis glanced between us. You two communicate without talking much. I hadn't noticed that. Apparently Tristan had. We've practiced. The professor smiled. It shows. After class, we walked toward the student center together. Campus was unusually busy. A charity event had taken over the main courtyard, with music playing and student clubs handing out flyers. A volunteer stepped in front of us. Would either of you like to sign up? I politely declined. Tristan stopped. What is it for? The volunteer explained that they needed helpers for a children's science fair the following month. Tristan listened carefully, asked 3 questions, read the entire information sheet, then signed his name. I stared at him. You volunteered. Yes. You don't even like crowds. I like science. You'll be surrounded by children. They'll ask questions. They'll ask a lot of questions. I know. We continued walking. I didn't expect that. What? You volunteering? He looked surprised. I thought you said I'd be a good dad. I blinked. I did. You seemed sincere. I was. So. He shrugged lightly. I wanted to see if you'd been right. For a second, I didn't know what to say. That wasn't a casual response. He had remembered a conversation from weeks earlier. Not just remembered it. Thought about it. Enough to change his plans. You've been thinking about that? Yes. For this long. I think about most things for a long time. I smiled to myself. I've noticed. He looked at me. So, would you come with me? To the science fair? He nodded. You don't have to volunteer. Just, another pause. I think I'd enjoy it more if you were there. The words were simple, but they stayed with me. I'll come. You will. Yeah. His smile appeared almost immediately. Not the small one I'd grown used to. A real one. Bright enough that even 2 students walking past noticed. One of them looked at Tristan. I don't think I've ever seen him smile that much. His friend laughed. Must have gotten an A. They kept walking. Neither of us said anything. A few seconds later, I nudged Tristan gently with my elbow. What? I think people are starting to notice. What are they noticing? You. He looked genuinely confused. They always noticed you. No. They're just seeing it now. He was quiet for several moments. Then he asked something so softly I almost missed it. Do you think I'm changing? I looked at him. Really looked. At the way he no longer kept his eyes on the ground. At how much easier he smiled. at how conversations seemed less difficult than they had only a few weeks earlier. Yeah. In a bad way? No. I smiled. I think you're just becoming more comfortable. With college. I shook my head. With me. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me with that familiar expression. The same one I'd noticed on our very first day in the lab. Except this time, I thought I finally understood it. He wasn't looking because he was distracted, or because he was trying to figure me out. He looked because being around me made him happy. And somewhere along the way, I had started feeling exactly the same. November arrived with the first real cold of the year. The trees around campus were almost bare now, and everyone walked a little faster between buildings, hands buried in coat pockets. Our semester project was nearly finished. Only the final presentation remained. You realize we'll actually survive this semester, I said as we packed our equipment after one last evening in the genetics lab. Tristan nodded. I calculated that. You calculated our chances of survival? No. He closed his notebook. I calculated how many hours we spent working together. I looked at him. You actually counted? 83. 83 hours. So far. I laughed. I have no idea whether that's impressive or slightly concerning. It can be both. Professor Ellis walked over one last time. I've read your final report. Neither of us spoke. It may be the strongest project in this year's class. I smiled. That's good to hear. It is. The professor glanced between us. I also have to admit something. What? I paired you together because I thought your personalities would clash. Tristan looked genuinely surprised. They didn't. Professor Ellis smiled. No. They balanced. After he walked away, we stood in silence for a few moments. I guess he was wrong. Tristan looked at me. I think he was accidentally right. What do you mean? If we'd been the same. He thought for a second. I don't think we'd have become friends. I smiled. I think you're right. Friday afternoon was the science fair. The building was filled with children asking endless questions about experiments, fossils, robots, and everything else the university had decided to display. I spent most of the afternoon watching Tristan. Not because he needed help, because I'd never seen him like this. Patient, relaxed, smiling. Every child who asked a question received his full attention. He never rushed an answer, never acted annoyed. A little boy looked up at him after one demonstration. You're really smart. Tristan smiled. I've had good teachers. The boy pointed toward me. Is he your friend? Tristan looked at me for only a second. Then back at the boy. Yes. The answer was immediate. Certain. For some reason, hearing him say it out loud made me happier than I expected. Later that afternoon, once the visitors had left and everyone was cleaning up, we carried a box of equipment back to the storage room. It was quiet. Just the two of us. You were right. I looked at him. About what? I liked today. I knew you would. You knew before I did. I've started noticing things too. He smiled. You have. We finished putting everything away and stepped outside. The campus was almost empty. The sun was beginning to set behind the library, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Neither of us seemed eager to leave. I've been thinking, Tristan said. That's never a short sentence. No. I laughed. It usually isn't. He took a slow breath. When we first met, you barely spoke. I know. I thought you didn't like me. I liked you immediately. I know that now. I just didn't know how to say it. You've gotten better. I think so. We started walking without deciding where we were going, just following the main path across campus. I've been thinking about something else too, he said. What's that? The first day, when you caught me looking at you. Yeah. I was embarrassed. I remember. I wasn't looking because I was trying to figure you out. I stayed quiet. I was looking because. He searched for the right words. I liked seeing you. The sentence was simple. Completely Tristan. No dramatic confession. No rehearsed speech. Just the truth. I smiled. I had a feeling. You did. Eventually. He looked relieved. I still look. I know. I probably always will. I know. He stopped walking. So. I have one question. I turned toward him. What is it? Would you like to go on an actual date? There it was. Not hidden behind vague words. Not disguised as studying. Not another excuse to spend time together. Just an honest question. I couldn't help laughing softly. What? You know? I looked at him. I was wondering how long it would take you. You already knew? I started suspecting it after the botanical garden. I should have asked then. No. Why? Because this. I looked around the quiet campus, then back at him. Feels like exactly the right moment. He nodded once. So, he smiled nervously. Is that a yes? I stepped a little closer. Yes. His smile slowly grew. Not rushed, not uncertain, just warm. I've never done this before, he admitted. I haven't done this with someone like you before. What does that mean? It means. I smiled. I'm looking forward to finding out. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Students passed in the distance, laughing as they crossed the courtyard. The world kept moving exactly as it always had. But for us, something had quietly changed. It hadn't happened all at once. It had happened through shared notebooks, long afternoons in the library, conversations over coffee, carefully organized project schedules, walks through autumn gardens, and one biology lab where my partner couldn't stop looking at me. As we reached the edge of campus, Tristan glanced at me again. I laughed. What? I'm looking again. I know. Does it still confuse you? I shook my head. No, it doesn't. Not anymore. Why? Because now I know what you're trying to say. He smiled. I haven't said anything. You don't have to. This time, when he looked at me, I smiled back first. And somehow, that said everything either of us needed to hear.